All right, hello friends. Let's start with the unhandled exception handler that Jan suggested. Jan, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so, I ever shared the story how we arrived with this API, with this proposal. Today, when people are kind of hosting the runtime with, say, REPLs, or, or in designers, when there's user code that might be running, and, there is no way how they can reliably handle all exceptions from that user code. In particular, they are not able to handle exceptions that, are thrown on new threads. And historically, we had subdomains for this, and we also had the unmanaged hosting APIs for this. None of those things exist in .NET Core, so this API proposal is about addressing that functionality up to make it possible for REPLs or designers or scenarios like that to catch unhandled exceptions.
So you said we used to be able to do it via app domains, but the app domain type is in, right? So presumably the event still exists. It just doesn't do anything then?
Yeah, the event still exists, and basically, like the way you did it with app domains, the app domain basically died when the unhandled exception happened. So you cannot actually, ignore the exception. It's as long as you use the managed APIs, using the unmanaged hosting APIs that existed in .NET Framework, you can actually ignore the exceptions. But the bar for using the unmanaged hosting APIs is very high. So.
Oh, so you're saying the event that is so this is the event you're modifying, right? So there's no way via app domains to ignore the exception, right? In order to ignore it, you have to use the hosting APIs.
Yeah, in .NET Framework. In .NET Core, we sort of have it on one of the hosting APIs kind of by accident. It's kind of not very well documented, and it doesn't really do what it should be doing. But
makes sense.
So I think the discussion is about the names, whether the names make sense. But,
yeah, the only thing I was thinking of, like I think you listed it there, the prior art for cancelled event arcs. Would it make sense to derive from cancelled event arcs and then just say if you don't want to die, you just set cancel to true? Or would that be too weird?
Can you repeat it? Are you saying that change the inheritance hierarchy for unhandled exception event arcs?
Yeah, basically. So we have this generic exception called cancelled event arcs, where the idea is you basically have a Boolean cancel that the handler can set, and that is the canonical way to say basically stop propagating this guy or stop the action or whatever the thing does, right? And so yeah, we would just insert that in between. I assume unhandled exception event arcs just derives from exception, right? Or does it derive from something weird that we can't inject? For some reason I can't type apparently. There we go. Now that derives from event arc. So technically it's safe to basically insert a type in between. We have done that many times before. So but it seems a bit odd.
Yeah, the cancel event arcs is also part of system component model, so I think it might be okay to move it, but it's it'll be another link on.
Yeah, it also is. I mean, I don't know, like, I also don't think that cancellation is necessarily the term people would look for. So I think ignore makes more sense. Another way to do it is handled. I mean, I think we use that terminology in other places, and you would set handled to true, in which case it would also not crash.
Another kind of pattern is for the tasks, we have very similar API, and for that, the property is read-only, and there is, method to kind of set it.
I see, that's the observed set observed thing. I mean, in this case, the property seems fine. I mean, I think for task, it makes it. I guess that's also event arcs there, right? It's a bit weird that we went with.
The thing you get with the set observe pattern is that you cannot flip it back to non-ignored. Let's say if you have multiple event handlers, they cannot kind of fight whether it's ignored or not.
I see. You can only set it one way, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one I don't actually care for. I mean, I guess the general pattern you would never set it to false, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it seems a bit odd to force it via the API. Yeah, I think that honestly, like, it makes sense to me as it's proposed. Like, I mean, to me, it's just like whether we say handled or ignore, method or property, to me seems largely the same. I don't know. What do other people think on the call?
I think ignore is fine.
And then property is also fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that as well. Just copy and paste this guy here.
The is terminating property, does that remind me, does that mirror something that's already in full framework?
Yeah, the is terminating property is in full framework today.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
I was going to bike shed on the name, but if it's there already, it's there.
What does it mean when it's set to false?
Well, today in .NET Core it's always set to true, and in .NET Framework it was always set to true as well for a very long time. It kind of originated in the .NET Framework 1.0 days when the unhandled exceptions were handled in some situations. In .NET Framework 1.0, the unhandled exceptions on finalizer threads were ignored, for example. And if the exception was about to be ignored, the is terminating was set to false.
I see. So is there any reason why we should leave it in, or should we just hide from IntelliSense entirely and say don't worry about it? Oh, I guess no, you're saying you're changing it now. Okay, never mind.
It kind of doesn't do exactly the same thing as in .NET Framework 1.0, but it does something that's kind of 95% the same thing. So
yeah, close enough. All right, so then this one is done. The socket's one.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this is when we removed system.net.connections, we removed two features from sockets HP handler that depended on it. And then we added one back, which was the connect callback because Bing really wanted it. And now it turns out that Bing really wants this too. The plain text filter feature. The capability here is to allow you to basically hook the stream at the point above TLS. In other words, whereas connect callback lets you hook the raw connection on the wire, this capability allows you to hook it on top of TLS so that you see the actual, HTTP protocol bits, either HTTP 1.1 or HTTP 2. So the API here is quite similar to the connect callback. It's using a context object. You can see the arguments that the context object has is the plain text stream, which is the underlying stream that we give you, and you can then wrap that however you want and return your own stream to us, or return that stream to us if you want. We also give you we also give you the HP version, which will always be 1.1 or 2, although in the future maybe 3. And the HP request message in case you want to take some action off of that. We also give you the HP request message and for the connect callback. So, and the callback itself is again very similar to the connect callback. Basically, we give you the context cancellation token, you give us back a stream. So the biggest concern I have here, frankly, is the naming. Like, I think some of the naming here is not great. The original naming was just plain text filter. I put a few comments in the alternative design about, issues around naming. I added stream in here, but I'm not sure that helps. I don't love the term plain text, but I don't have anything better. Do we want to include callback in the name? And if so, how do we do that without making it ridiculously long? Any feedback around that is super useful.
Yeah, from my point of view, it seems reasonable. I mean, I don't have super strong opinions one way or the other.
We have HTTP version here and non-HTTP request message properties. Would it make sense to just rename that to version, or are we trying to disambiguate something?
Well, we don't have HP. We don't have HP on the request message simply because that's how we did it on the original connect callback. I think that if we change the name to just version, that seems like it doesn't provide enough info. Like, it wouldn't be obvious to me that it means HP version. So I kind of prefer keeping it as HP version. I wouldn't mind changing it to HP request message if we think that's better. But then we probably want to change the other context, the same thing for connect callback, which would be fine to do that too, but it's just another change.
I mean, something like request version could also work. I think what you're trying to get at with this version is the request message has a version, but then the client actually chooses which outgoing version to try. So this could be different from what the user asks for, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the user may, for example, specify. Well, now we've got version policy on the request message as well. So the version info that you give us on a request message might be something like 2.0 or lower. In which case, by the time we get to this point and we've actually established a connection, the HP version here it definitely can be different than the version as specified on the request message. What is the property on HP request message actually called? Is it just a version?
Yeah, it's just version. It would be nice if the name here could somehow communicate like this is after the policy and all that is applied. But I don't know if we can make that succinct.
The name of HP version in particular, or of something else?
HTTP version. I think everything else is fine.
I mean, you could call it negotiated version or something, right?
That could work.
That kind of implies that something happened beforehand.
I mean, it's negotiated when you're using TLS. Otherwise, it's just kind of. Well, I guess it's a negotiation between the user and the sockets handler still. So I think that would be fine.
Or you could also go with final or something else that kind of implies that it's post policy, right?
Right.
I have a maybe easier question. Like, is there in English a difference between plain text as 2 words and plain text as 1 word? Because it seems in the framework we mostly use plain text with 2 words, which means capital T, but we also use in 1 or 2 places the lowercase t.
I don't think it's significant. I usually see it as 1 word. But that's just sort of that's kind of a, what's the term? That's like a usage that has been adopted by, I guess, various security folks mostly.
Yeah, I'm looking through APIs of .NET, and most of the matches outside of all of the matches outside of the concept of security have a capital T. All of the matches within security have a lowercase t. I shouldn't say all. I mean like 99%.
Yeah, that sounds about
right. A
right.
lot of those are related to UI components where it's not a protocol kind of thing, right? It's like I'm typing in plain text.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I guess plain text here really means unencrypted stream then?
That's what it's intended to convey, yeah. I don't love that term, to be honest with you. I think it has some, but short of unencrypted stream, which I don't know, maybe that's better.
Yeah, I don't have strong opinions either way. Like, I'm just wondering, like, is plain text important to convey? Then probably we should leave it in. Otherwise, maybe just call it sockets HTTP filter context if it's not important.
It's been too long for me to remember why, but in the original SystemNet Connections review, we chose plain text as well.
Yep, then plain text it is. I mean, it just seems very long, right? It just makes everything slightly longer, so that's why. That's kind of the other reason why I'm asking.
I mean, we could remove stream from this. I added stream because without stream, it's kind of not clear what you're filtering. But I don't think it's super necessary.
I guess we talked about this last time. To me, filter is still weird, but I guess this is the networking terminology. I still kind of expect a predicate when I talk about a filter. But yeah, I guess.
I mean, you could say something like interceptor, but that's longer.
I know Steven is a big fan of the term middleware.
Yes, in some alternate universe.
I can tell you, every single time I talk to Fowler and I use the term middleware, he told me that was the wrong usage of the term middleware. So I've kind of given up on that.
Would this ever be used with HTTP2 because there's really no text anymore?
Yep. and it's going to be kind of weird because every protocol is different. So HTTP 1, you'll see like serialized one request, but 2, you'll see the raw protocol, and then for 3, I imagine you'll see each individual request again. So.
Well, I'm suggesting it's not text anymore, right? It's a binary blob essentially, but it's unencrypted.
Yeah, you'll see the unencrypted HTTP2.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what plain text means, at least when I think of cryptography, but I know we talked about using raw also.
Yeah, I guess unencrypted or raw it's kind of the same, I guess. But like, yeah, I guess if it's not actual text, if it's a binary blob, then you go into the cryptographic definition of the term plain text, meaning unencrypted, but that might not be very intuitive for people. But maybe it doesn't matter because you probably don't look at the payload anyway. You just forward it and run it through something else. So maybe that's academic anyway. So I hear super strong opinions on this call. So I guess the only thing we said so far is that HTTP version we should consider something like negotiated version.
Yeah, and I'm fine with everything else. Request message, I can't remember what we called it on the last API, but it's really the first request message that initiated the connection.
Yeah.
So it could be confusing to just see a request message there, but I think we'd want consistency with what we chose last time, which I think was just request message.
We did call it just request message. Frankly, I like initial request message better because my concern here is that people make some decision based off the request message that's not appropriate because they somehow are forgetting that there are going to be lots of requests that are sent over this connection. And so initial request message kind of conveys that better. If we don't mind sneaking in a change to the other feature as well, I'd be happy to change it.
So when you say initial, what decision would I make differently based on initial versus non-initial?
It's not so much that you're going to make a different decision. The point is just to reinforce that any decision you make based off this context is you've only got access to the initial message here. There will be subsequent messages that you're not going to get access to because you've already established the filter. And so the point is just to convey that.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's basically the initial versus the current, basically, right?
Well, it's the first message that caused this new connection to be created. So one thing just purely from reading the API names, it's not clear that this is called once per connection. In fact, with the current wording, it would be totally reasonable for someone to think that it's called per request.
Once per connection.
That's true.
I see, because basically once you have the kind of the pipe initiated, at that point you just wrap the stream and then everything goes over that stream.
Yeah, so this connection will be pooled probably and reused for many requests.
Yeah, this one I'm modulo looking at code. I'm not sure that helps or doesn't help.
I think the previous API was a little clearer because the callback was called like connection callback or something like that. Or but in this case, it's not clear by the naming. So initial request message makes sense to me here.
Yeah, I mean, either one makes sense to me, I guess. Right, so that means then the only changes that we should consider is HTTP version to negotiated version, request message to initial request message. Anything else?
Can we sneak in making the connect context match the request message naming too? Let me put it this way. I'm going to sneak that in. Does anybody object?
Well, I guess my question is like, what specifically do you mean by that?
Just naming consistency on it, because the connect callback context has a request message property as well.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Let's be consistent about initial request message there.
So basically what you're saying, we should also rename the property on the other one.
Yeah.
Technically breaking change between RC1 and RC2, right?
Actually, the connect callback did not make it into RC1, so
Oh, perfect.
it's new in RC2.
No objections for me.
Is that the sockets HTTP connection context that you're talking about?
Yes, that's exactly it.
It seems reasonable to me. I mean, the rationale is the same, so I guess aligning them, generally speaking, makes sense.
Yeah, you can see there's a link to the connect callback API in the issue here, just below proposed API, if you want to see it.
This one here?
Scroll down to the bottom for the actual approved API.
Gotcha. It seems, and naming wise, it seems very much aligned. Do you foresee any other filters in the future? Or would it be reasonable to just shorten the whole thing to just sockets HTTP filter context?
So do you mean merge both of the context classes here into just one?
No, I think he's just talking about naming of the filter.
Yeah, because the socket HTTP connection context is relatively short, right? And then you have connect callback. And then in this case, first of all, you don't use the term callback on the property, you just call it plain text stream filter. But then also the class name is fairly long-winded. And so I was just wondering whether it makes sense to shorten it.
I don't know. I don't know if we might have another kind of filter in the future.
Then I guess it is what it is. Where's the... That is the one. So here's what I have. Does that strike people as what we talked about?
Can we call it negotiated HTTP version? I know that's kind of wordy, but
I don't mind. I guess I should probably also update the thing in the sample code just to make it clear. Dun.
I'm happy. Any other feedback?
Gee, everybody's very mandible today. That's rare. No strong opinions?
I mean, I think HTTP version is a little redundant, but I'm fine. It doesn't bother me that much.
All right, so then I guess this is what it is then. Let me approve this so we don't forget. All right, so then 2 down, 1 more.
This hopefully is simple. This is just one of the things I want to try and do in 6.0 is make sure we don't have any weird gaps as far as task-based APIs. This is one we just stumbled across the other day. We have a begin-end version of send file, but not a task-based async send file. So this is just add task-based async for this API.
Oh, this is on socket now.
What does it mean? What does it mean for the file name parameter to be potentially null in the second overload?
Well, it means you are specifying just a pre-buffer and a post-buffer, or one or the other. Now, why you do that, I don't know.
Okay, but I guess it matches existing stuff. Okay, sure, whatever.
Basically, it just inherits the behavior that transmit file has in Windows, and it's kind of propagated from there.
Can we add a cancellation token to this? I don't know if the Windows API supports it, but
We should add a cancellation token. At the very least, on Linux, we would support it.
And I'm assuming, I think on Windows, it's just overlap stuff. So presumably we could make that work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree.
and instead of a byte array, take a memory, read-only memory.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
All right, so hold on. We take a cancellation token. Presumably we just make it optional, right? We don't have overloads for that.
Yeah, and also I kind of wonder, well, I was going to say I kind of wonder whether we even need the first overload at all, but maybe for consistency we want it.
For the first one, having the file name null suddenly seems strange. Or actually, no, never mind. You didn't.
Well, actually, it is kind of strange in that I actually just opened an issue yesterday that it actually does. It's even like the synchronous send file as well as begin send file are both documented to allow null for that first argument. So our annotation there and .NET Framework actually does allow null. And I have a PR out to fix the bug where in .NET Core we accidentally don't. So I think that first overload actually needs to be string question mark file name as well, just for pure consistency, in which case it's a no op.
I was about to say, what does it do when you don't pass in a file name? You just don't send anything?
We don't send anything. Again, it's just sort of inheriting the behavior of the underlying API. And we made that work on Unix, and then it just so happened that we forgot to include the annotation, which we're not going to fix in .NET 5 because it doesn't. I can't imagine anyone actually caring to pass null here. In the first overload, I could hypothetically see a scenario where someone wanted to use the second one instead of calling send twice or something for two different buffers, but.
So does it make sense in the second one to submit the file name with null then?
You can, yeah. I mean, you can pass, basically it ends up being the same as passing two buffers of data at the same time.
So is it then fair to say you either specify a file name or a buffer, but neither both, or but never both?
No, you can specify any or all of them, or none of them.
The useful case here is always specify a file name, optionally specify a pre-buffer or a post buffer.
Right. Huh. It's like you want to send a file and you want to send a header and a suffix, a footer, optionally as well. That's kind of the prototypical case.
Oh, so pre-buffer and post buffer is just basically additional data that goes before the file or after the file?
Exactly.
Yes. I see.
The classic example is send an HTTP response with the HTTP headers and pre-buffer and the contents of the file, off disk, is specified by file name. That's why the API was originally added in Windows.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess for consistency, I would probably just leave the overloads then as they are. Just have two of them. And then, Stephen, based on what you said, I think what you suggested was on the first one, don't mark string as string question mark then?
No, it should be string question mark.
Okay.
All of our send file methods should be string question mark. It's a bug in .NET 5 that it's missing the question mark.
I see. Oh, that's what you mean by you wouldn't fix it. I see. Okay.
And we're fixing it in .NET 6 because that's a non-breaking change for annotations to allow null inputs where we weren't previously.
Alrighty, so that means this is then the API shape.
The second one should be read-only memory rather than memory.
Oh, sorry.
Also, they shouldn't be nullable.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be nullable? Why not? I thought they were optional.
Well, you just pass in an empty memory.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, memory is a struct, right? Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah. I can't see the end. I assume the second overload has a cancellation token at the end.
Yeah. And then so good will I spell it right.
Cancellation token in any of our other socket APIs. I don't bind it, but I don't know if there's a consistency concern there.
We are horribly inconsistent across all of our APIs, primarily because we started adding the equals default after we'd already added a bunch of APIs with cancellation token. So I think most of the newer ones we've been defining have the equals default, and ones we defined prior to some date didn't. We started going back in some cases and adding them, but we haven't done any kind of consistent audit.
Yeah, I mean, my personal take is like unless you mirror them off of other overloads, I would probably just go for the shorter version to be defined. I mean, in this case, you could make a case and say like, well, you go from begin send file to send file async, but I don't know. As Steven said, like, we're generally not very consistent, so if consistency is the goal, that would mean that never we could make things better. So that wouldn't be very useful. Right then, this is the API.
So I missed the beginning of the meeting email. You said this was the last one. Does that mean we have no more API ready for review issues?
That's right. We just went again to 0. Like I think starting a few weeks ago, we drove it to 0, and now pretty much every meeting is 1 or 2 so far. So
wow,
yeah, it's pretty good.
Nice.
There's a few bigger ones coming though. So there's the binary data that Christoph was talking about. There's what was the other one? I forgot. There was one other partner request. Yeah, so I think that's why I keep cutting it short to just 1 hour, because we don't have enough meat for 2 hours.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Let's enjoy it while it lasts. I give this thing 2 more months and then we are back to, holy cow, there's 80 open issues. Now, hopefully not. Hopefully we can keep it below 20. That would be good. All right, any other questions or things that you want to look at the last 10 minutes? Otherwise, I call it a day. Sweet. Then I wish you guys a happy Tuesday, and then I see you either this week or next week.
Thanks.
Thanks, Emma.
Bye-bye.
Bye.